How's it going, everyone? This is another Security Unfiltered podcast episode. So, real quick, before we dive into the episode, I have to give a big shout out to 10K Media. This episode would not be possible without 10K Media. So, big shout out to Adam over there for putting this episode together. And with that, we will go ahead and dive into the episode. Thanks, everyone. Good to finally have you on, Moti. I'm very excited for our conversation. I think it's going to be really interesting to see, where it goes and hear about your journey.
Great. Hi, guys, and thank you, Joe, for inviting me.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Moti, why don't we hear about, how you got into IT, how you kind of got started with security. And the reason why I start everyone off there is because there's a section of my audience that are looking to get into security or looking to get into IT. Maybe they're doing a career change, right? And I feel hearing everyone's backgrounds really helps them to know, like, hey, if they did it, maybe I can do it, right? Or if they came from a similar background, maybe I can also do something like this. So what's your background? How did you get into it?
I'm smiling because, I have on one hand a very typical background that is relevant to people that are doing security and cyber in Israel. On the other hand, it's rather unique from the point of view of general audience. So actually, I got into security from my army, my army time. I was a member of the Israeli cyber unit, it's a known number in the cyberspace, like 8,200. So actually, as a really young guy, around the age of 18, I was recruited and went through 7 years of serving around security, cybersecurity, signal security. And I found out there during my time 3 very important things. One is that I really like the domain. I really care about it. I really think that thinking as a defender or as an attacker from the point of view of cyber is really an intellectual problem I really liked. The second thing I learned that I really like, and it's really natural for me to be in a position that, remember, it's an intelligence unit. So combine on one hand technical capabilities and in the other hand, the big picture of the intelligence. And in the industry, it's called the product manager. There I found out that really what I want to do when I leave the army is actually product management, which is in the connection between technology and need. And the role is the combination between the two. And the third thing I really liked and learned is the huge opportunity that cyber brings around innovation. Basically, again, as an attacker, as a defender, there is endless amount of things. Imagination is only what you do is really limited to your imagination, because at the end of the day, it's a combination of not only technology, but technology and people. When you are trying to find vulnerabilities in code, or when you are trying to attack an infrastructure, in both cases, you are handling, as much as you're handling the technology, you are handling actually the people that built it. And there is also an element there of psychology and processes, and the combination between security and people is really like what it sounds a little bit philosophical, so I understand that, but this is the thing that I really learned during my time in 8200 that I really like, and of course doing good things for my country, but put that aside. So I spent there 7 years. During them, I went also to university and learned computer science and linguistics, and then started my career as a product manager in various companies. And in the last 10 or 12 years, I came back to cybersecurity, a little bit more than that actually, and served in roles that are and built products and created business which are in the cybersecurity space. First in Microsoft, and then and now in the last half year in Apiiro.
Wow. So there's a lot to unpack there. You know, talk to me a bit about how you decided to go down the computer science and linguistics path, right? or what made you want to do that work? I can understand the computer science part of it, but the
Yeah.
linguistics part is like, I mean, it's not even out of left field. It's like out of the park, like trying to
So
get into the play field, right?
fun in my, again, it was I think around 20 years ago, but like consistently across the years in the university, Tel Aviv University, where I learned, there were always exactly two people that did exactly two that did this combination of linguistics and computer science. And I think the route to why I chose that was really related to the things I talked about earlier. Parts of the part of the problem that existed in the intelligence work like 20 years ago and is really relevant today to every person is the fact that you have so much information. Usually, the problem you're saying is that intelligence, my problem is to get to the information. You can get to a lot of information with many ways via and multiple types of information. Then the problem came out of the vast amount of data that I have applicable to my at my hands, at my table. How quickly do I choose the ones that is actually helping me to answer the question that I'm investigating now? And as a result, not only like in every intelligence organization, a big problem is around automatically and using, before it was called AI, but using machines to help you to unpack what is the content that you are looking at, either if it's text or voice or code, whatever it means, like how you can scale yourself only by having machines that understand what you are looking for and help you to do the first level of filtering and consolidation and correlation of what you are looking to for into something that you as a human being can digest as an analyst or as an intelligence officer. And as a result, I had the luxury of and the way to do that is, again, before GPT and before language models, the way to do that was by understanding natural language. And I had, as part of my army, I had around 2 years in which that's something I did. I was in the technology part, technology and intelligence part of understanding human language automatically. And as I said earlier, that was part of the thing that fascinated me, the combination around intelligence, but also people and understanding, trying to understand what the document is talking about, to understand it, and trying to programmatically understand what is the thing that you're actually looking after. Like what is the reader, the intelligence reader that you're looking after, translate it to something which is programmatic, and then allowing a machine to understand this program and provide you valuable information. These were like the me and many other people was like the edge of technology that we handled in back then in the intelligence scope. Since then came Google and came ChatGPT and came all of these technologies that are trying basically to do the same, like code a question and then bring you the relevant information. And for that, you need to understand really well the question and you need to understand really well the answers that you are providing. And I was really interested in I did it practically in the army, and then decided it's really interesting for me to understand, like to try and learn about that, and not only go through usual computer science I know to program, but also understand kind of how our language is programmed. And if we dwell into that, like I went to a university, Tel Aviv University, that is one of the only universities in the world that when they teach linguistics, they don't ask you to know any language. Usually when you go to a linguistics courses, you need to learn either know advanced or learn through the 3 years, you need to learn like 7 languages. In Tel Aviv University, the philosophy is called generative linguistics, interestingly. And the idea was that really there is a common framework, really an algorithm that is the basis to all languages. And when we are born and we are learning English or Hebrew, Yiddish or German, actually we are taking the generic algorithm and setting it to a specific language. And understanding linguistics is really understanding the basic algorithm of how you know language. And so it is a kind of a natural combination, if you think about that, between that and logical mathematics and computer science. So these type of motivations brought me to learn. It's so funny that 20 years after, with everything that is happening now with LLM and like things that we did around neural networks used to natural language, to text understanding, etc., like as hobby, like or in the army as 20 years ago, are now like 1,000 times more sophisticated, but like there is a comeback. So, but that's what I learned. And of course, after that, I didn't exercise that at all at my work. It was more of like coming from the army, learning. Had a lot of time during my 2 years of doing this in the university, and then moved to a more traditional product, high tech, and then engineering management roles in the industry, until I came back to security around, as I said, 12 years ago, when I joined Microsoft.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I guess I never thought about it that way. The best way to, I guess, work with a language model or determine, create something that could review a document and give you the pertinent information in a couple bullet points. You would need to know linguistics. You need to be an expert at linguistics, really. That's it's very interesting, and it kind of takes me down the rabbit hole, right? Of, well, if this kind of existed, 20 years ago, right, and the public is just now seeing Chat GPT for the first time this year, basically for the most part. What do they have now that we're going to see in the public in 20 years, right? Like, that's always the fascinating part for me.
Yeah.
I was watching another podcast, and this former Navy SEAL was talking about, the night vision that was used on the raid to kill Osama bin Laden, right? In the movie Zero Dark 30, you see him as these 4 tube things, and everyone that is into that kind of thing, that was brand new for them. Like they never saw it before. And he said, yeah, like, when I got into the Navy SEALs, early 2000s, those were 10 years old. Like that was old tech. They're literally using hand-me-downs for that mission, like, and I'm sitting here like, what? Like, because to me, that was like cutting edge, like, oh my God, this is amazing, and for him, it was just another day. It was just another day at the office. Like, yeah, I'm going to use this old tech. Hopefully it works, that sort of thing.
I'll give you another example which rhymes with what you said. I think, like in the last, coming back, for example, to cyber, in the last 10 years plus, there is the common understanding of nation state attacks and attacks which are sophisticated, which are not only based on, I'll distribute a random malware to your computer and try to get Bitcoin out of you or do a simple phishing, but I will collect intelligence. I will understand who you are. I understand I have a really specific price I'm going after. I'm going after intellectual property, and then I will go low and slow, and like nation state attacks. And currently, all of the security products in this space are aiming to protect you from nation state attacks. But really, there was an aha moment 10 years ago with, I think, the so-called Chinese attack on RSA and Google, that brought that into the attention and created completely new defense technologies like SIEM and XDR and EDR are part of the thing that I built. But again, 20 years ago, it was all news. Okay, that's the funny part of that. So there are places in which I think intelligence bodies has the luxury of being really front, cutting edge technologies. So I totally agree.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting to see what's out there, but you have to go through so much to see what's out there that it may not be worth it. So that that kind of takes us to your time at Microsoft, right? Can we talk a little bit about what it was like to be at Microsoft, being such a large company, right? Probably one of the largest in the world for sure. One of the biggest tech names of all time. What did you do there? What did you specialize in? We talked about your, I guess it was product management, right? Experience within your 8200 group. Did
Yeah.
that experience translate over to Microsoft very well, or was there a learning curve behind it?
So I had uh, two distinct periods in Microsoft. The first one, like I think the first 3 or 4 years, I joined Microsoft as back then I was a director of product management already. Like I worked in multiple companies before joining Microsoft. I also established my own startup, and I had like a vast experience, and then joined Microsoft as a director of product management, and then as an engineering and a product manager. And it was, I think, in kind of standard type of product for Microsoft. So I joined originally and was part of the telecom mobile group on Microsoft, developing mobile applications and mobile solutions, and then started to work on the advertising products of Microsoft. Back then had a very big advertising product, where, by the way, tons of what I know later and implemented later in security, which we'll talk about, it was around security is data and AI and data science. I actually learned during my days around leading a team in Microsoft that was responsible for targeting, like understanding you, understanding the retailer, and matching the best we can as quickly as we can between the ad and the person. So the
Hmm.
chance for you to click will be the biggest, the highest that possible. Not a novel cause. I'm not something I'm too proud from the point of view of impact that we made on the world, but really, again, cutting edge technology that had later on a lot of similarities when we actually incubated the security business in Microsoft, which I'm happy to talk about later. But that's where I spent 3 or 4 years, and then I left Microsoft. I felt that I need something. Again, it sounds like a little bit as cliche, but I felt that I need something that is bigger, more impactful, and that I'm building products and good products and delivering in quality and creating more money and sophisticated algorithms and really cutting edge technology. But I'm not making enough impact. I'm not the first one probably that said that, but this is what I felt back then. And then I left and actually did a pause in my high-tech career and went to do something completely different, and went for 3 years to work for the Israeli prime officer, the Israeli government, where I spent 3 years doing like some of the most interesting things I did in my life, and feeling that I'm creating an impact and value. And then when I left there, I got an offer to rejoin Microsoft, and I did, mainly because of it's a great company and great people, and I really wanted to go back there. But I rebooted my career over there. I didn't join an existing business. I actually incubated together with two good friends. I incubated a startup within Microsoft, which is around security, which I led as the leader for 7 years. And these three persons startup grew to 600 teams people that I managed, from zero revenue to a business of more than $2 billion revenue, and tens of thousands of customers we protected. And I think this was probably the most influential part of my career, and an amazing 7, 8 years that I spent in Microsoft.
Hmm. Wow. There's a lot there again,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
What you discussed, the work with the government, right? That it was the most rewarding work that you've ever done. And honestly, when I think of working for the government myself, right? That's absolutely at the front of my mind, right? Is, helping change and direct things in the right way with the government that's impacting your nation. And I mean that's a huge honor. Can you talk a little bit about what you were doing for them? Were you, potentially, looking at, uh, you know, let's say digital threats or whatever it might be, right? And then kind of translating that to people that are not as aware or not as fluent in the area as you were? Like, what was that work like?
So I can't talk too much about that. I would only say that it's like the usual, like the usual. It's like we use technology to help people and make sure that the country is safe, etc. And amazing 3 years, but it's hard for me to go into more details.
Gotcha.
I would say that like really it's coming back to the core of the things I liked in every role that I did. Maybe that's like a more meta statement. It was an amazing opportunity in which innovation was the thing. Innovation and being focused on a mission and using technology to achieve this mission, and imagination was the only thing that stopped us. And that's one. And I think what I tried to reestablish and to find to myself later when I went to Microsoft and now when I'm in Apiiro is exactly this type of culture assets, of the fact that we are doing new stuff. New stuff is really interesting, but also really, really important. It's not enough. It will be really interesting. It should be really important. And that's the main reason that and I'm thankful for Microsoft for giving me the opportunity and my managers back there that believed in that, is that when we tried to establish security business in Microsoft, it was one, because we thought we can do a really good job. We can make a lot of money for the company, but also we can really take a broken market and help customers to be more safe, really. And the thing of doing good, on how impactful it is on me and also on the people that worked with me, is something that one of the things that I took really deeply from how like the work that I did in these 3 years and for my career moving forward. There is nothing that is more creating motivation than the impact that you are making on actual stuff and on doing good.
Right. So at Microsoft, when you went back to Microsoft, you mentioned that you were kind of in charge of, creating a product that would, make some significant changes, right, within the security ecosystem, potentially at Microsoft, right?
Yeah.
Um, so when I look at your LinkedIn, right, it says that you were in charge of endpoint security. So to me, that sounds like Microsoft Defender. Is that a correct assumption, or
Yeah.
or
I was part of I led the incubation team that started Microsoft Defender. Yes, exactly.
okay? Yeah, I mean, as someone that is typically, just naturally against using Azure, right? But let's assume that we have to use Azure. Um, it's hard. It's very difficult, nowadays to not recommend using Defender, right? I mean, it is such an all-encompassing security solution. It's really more of a security platform within Microsoft Azure, right? Like that's the point that it is at right now, of being so expansive, of touching basically every facet that you can use and deploy in Azure. It touches it. Were you instrumental in kind of changing the perception of Microsoft Defender? And the reason why I say that is because, previously, right, Microsoft Defender was that thing on your desktop or laptop that was antivirus, that was kind of made fun of, right?
Yep.
That was lacking in some areas compared to the rest of the market. And then when they introduced that into Azure, right, it was almost thought of the same way, right? Everyone in the technology space kind of assumed like, oh, it's going to be the same thing. But very rapidly that changed when people were, seeing the different features and functionality and what it was able to do and what it was catching and how it was actually operating. People quickly started to shift their perspective, and that was an interesting time in the industry. Were you instrumental in that as well?
I hope so, because I believe so. When we started Microsoft, when we started the Defender, at the beginning it was called Windows Defender, and then we evolved to Microsoft Defender. And the name change also came with a strategy change. We can talk about it later. But when we started, exactly, Defender was an consumer antivirus. There was zero that was given for free as part of the operating system. There was tons of people that worked with Microsoft on security, but their approach was security in the platform, so making Windows more secure in general. And there was no two things were non-existing in Microsoft. A, security wasn't a business. It wasn't something we were selling. B, it wasn't something that was focused on businesses and enterprises. And basically our incubation and pitch back then to the head of Microsoft, to the head of Windows, like when I pitched incubation and got the initial funding to actually start the work, was that we think we can change these two things. First, we need to focus in Microsoft on supplying security for enterprises, which brings a much higher bar than just an AV on antivirus on a consumer machine. Secondly, that we need to think about that as a business. And then came all the technology, and why we think we'll do it much better, because of the cloud, because of AI, because of, basically we said that we think that we can, not only us, by the way, in parallel, other vendors like CrowdStrike and Sunbereason and Sentinel-1 said similar things, but the common understanding was back then that in order to make security works, endpoint security works, we need to change the game from a security game to a data game. So the way to catch sophisticated nation state attackers is not by being a policeman that says, hey, here is this is what the AV did, antivirus. This is a bad thing, stop it. Really, nation state attackers are much more sophisticated. They are usually not doing bad things. They are doing usual things with a bad intent. So you need to evolve from being, that was our pitch, from being a policeman to being a detective, or from being a doorman to being like a DVR system that actually has a CSI type of that records everything and search for anomalies and search for the mistakes that the attackers are doing, and then understanding the entire scope of the breach. And the way to do that is data, and data in the cloud, and this back in the days in Microsoft we thought we had a unique advantage, and that was really the pitch, really the 30-second pitch of why we got funded at the beginning, and that was the first 1 or 2 years was to prove that this technology is actually working, and create the go-to-market motion that allow Microsoft to talk with security people in enterprises, because we sold Windows, or they sold Windows, to IT. And we went and said, no, we want to be a security player and the respective security player with product truth. And for that, we needed to find the right persona, which was the SOC persona and the CISO persona, which was a persona that Microsoft didn't approach. And so the first 2 or 3 years were all about building the technology, showing that it's actually working, that we can catch sophisticated attacks. This technology was later coined EDR, like endpoint detection and response. And secondly, building the go-to-market motion of being able to deliver this value to SecOps and CISO, and actually also ask money for that. So after 3 years, I'm using now Gartner, like everyone knows Gartner, so I'm using Gartner as a reference. And when we started, we were, I think, a niche player in the endpoint protection, a Magic Quadrant, which compares between different vendors and gives them grades. And we did all of the voyage from niche to contender to, after 3 or 4 years, to a market leader, together with others like CrowdStrike and others. And since then, I managed the team till year and a half ago, 2 years ago. So for the first 7 years, we grew, as always, a combination of good luck and good execution. We grew significantly in the size of the business, in the credibility of the market leadership. I think today it's really common that it's Microsoft and CrowdStrike and possibly SentinelOne are the three leaders in the endpoint security space. And we grew the team and we grew the impact. I think after the last sentence, I would say after 3 years, we changed the name from Windows Defender to Microsoft Defender, and it was part of another aha moment that we had, not trivial one in Microsoft, but the fact that not all endpoints in the world are Windows. 80% of them are, but there is also, or 80% in the PC space. Okay, but there is Mac, and of course there is Linux. And in the data center, Linux is the most prevalent. And of course, there is mobile, iOS, and Android. So really, if you want to be a credible endpoint security player that actually bring value to a customer, not only sell, but actually bring value, and we need to evolve to meet customer where we are, and not protect only Windows because we are Microsoft, but actually protect. And we developed Linux capabilities and Mac capability and iOS and Android. And again, slowly gained. You can imagine CISOs were rather suspicious of really Microsoft. You are going to be best of breed on protecting Mac or Linux. I don't believe that. And I think part of the general game in Microsoft back in the days under Satya leadership, but its security was kind of the forefront, was, yes, we are not a Microsoft player, we are a security player. And that part of the product truth that will help us to change step by step the perception of what is Defender and the value of Defender, and create also a sizable business. And during this time, I was the product leader. So I managed the product management, engineering teams, research, DevOps, etc. All of the operation that actually brought the product was under my responsibility. Amazing 7 years of scale. Each year is really different than the others, from nothing to a huge business. Tons of impact, not only business, but also really helping customers, which is the most important thing, as you understand. And also growing as a manager from a really small team to a huge operation of multiple hundreds of people.
That's really interesting. That's fascinating how you explained it, right? You essentially created the security component in the cloud, really redefined it and re-engineered the solution from the ground up, it sounds like. And in doing that, you even had to, create a new perception of how this business should be viewed internally at Microsoft, which is really fascinating to me.
Yep.
So is this kind of viewed as almost like a separate entity within Microsoft that has its own bottom line, its own cost, and things like that? Is that kind of how that's viewed within there? Because it's so large, I can understand why Microsoft would do that.
So I'll say two things. First of all, I think like you said it really nicely before I answered the issue around the P&L. Our pitch was there, like when we tried to pitch so one analogy we used was from a policeman to a detective. The second one was that the previous framework of how you protect endpoints was from within the endpoint itself. You installed an AV or a code that protected the devices that it ran on. And our technological approach or innovative approach was, we called it the brain in the cloud. Like the cloud is actually protecting your endpoint. The endpoint is only sending data to the cloud and getting commands for the cloud. But now you get infinite scale. You get the capability to look across. Not only when I protect your endpoint, it's not only your endpoint. I actually compare it to all of the history of this endpoint and the other endpoints near it in the same organization and all of the organization in the world and all of the windows in the world. So and all of the devices in the world. So really, the brain in the cloud was kind of the tag name that we used to under the internal code name of Defender. We started from day one or day two as a separate P&L, but not as a separate org. We were part of the Windows org. And for a long time, until I think 2 years ago, and that's really kind of the evolutionary story of security in Microsoft. We were not only the only security business, there were other security teams, but each team sat in the platform they protected. So we protected endpoints. We were part of the endpoint team that built the Windows and etc. But there was an email protection team that was part of the Office team, and there was a cloud protection team that was part of the cloud team, the Azure team, etc. And around it was publicly announced, I think, around 2 years ago, maybe a little bit more than that. There was a big decision in Microsoft to actually combine all of the security teams into one all of the distributed security teams to one security business. And one of the founders of AWS, Charlie Bell, joined Microsoft and actually established this reporting to Satya, and took all of the 3 or 4 or 5 different security product teams in each of the line of business that created the security line of business. It was a very important step in the Microsoft voyage of becoming a security player. At this point of time, coming back to me, actually, I changed role and moved from leading one of the security lines, the defender line, and took a more holistic horizontal role, reporting to Charlie, of chief strategy officer for the security business. My role was to look on product strategy across all of the product lines that Microsoft Security now had in one team. So endpoint was one, I managed that, but there was also identity and compliance and data protection, etc., and cloud protection. And my role was to look across all of these different markets, different products, and lead product strategy, which is the horizontal one, and also drive innovation and understand what is the growth framework of Microsoft, what are the new markets we think are interesting, what are the things in which we have gaps and we need to complete, and that was kind of moving from the trenches to the headquarter and looking and like a bird's eye view across of everything that Microsoft did in security, which is almost everything that exists in security. Okay, so that was again another unique experience that was my last role in Microsoft and actually brought me back into the trenches, into a new domain in application security, which is what I'm doing now in Apiiro.
Yeah, it's fascinating how Microsoft has turned themselves into a one-stop shop, right, for almost everything tech. Everything that you could imagine with tech, everything that you would want to do, they're basically a one-stop shop. And it's challenging, right? It has its own native challenges, but it's extremely beneficial for a lot of companies out there, and that's why a lot of companies, kind of go all in on Microsoft. So can we talk a bit about what you're doing at Apiiro? What the company specializes in and what you're specialized in within the company.
Yeah, gladly. So I'll actually connect it really naturally to my last year in Microsoft. So as I said, first of all, I am in Apiiro. Apiiro is in domain of application security. We are building a cloud application security platform that help customers to build and deliver secure code. Okay, and I joined the company it's a 3 years old company. So I joined it not at the beginning, but it's really relatively a young company as a chief product officer. And as you can see, it's like now, like understanding the story of my life. I really, from working in a big company, building incubation, and now I be modest, but also succeeding in building a very, very huge business, and then have an overarching look across even wider business of around like $20 billion business, which is the security business of Microsoft. Like they publicly said that. Coming back to the trenches, to a small team, to doing stuff at hands, and from the beginning, and I couldn't be more happier on that. And the reason I joined, or there are two different kind of forces that brought me into the role. So I'll share them and then talk a little bit about what we are doing. And so So one thing is the domain, okay, in which Apiiro is working, and I think has an opportunity to be really impactful, which is, or the problem statement, which is helping businesses that are writing code, which is basically every business in the world today, to deliver, to build and deliver code that is secure from the beginning. I have, as I said, multiple years of experience from both sides, defender, attacker in security, and for 8 years, like my role in Microsoft, we ran after attackers that actually manipulated vulnerabilities and bugs and issues that existed in software. If you think about that, it's kind of like we were the doctor that when there was a disease, we try to identify the disease and make you healthier. But we fixed it. Okay, we evacuated the attacker and everything was safe. And then a week after, a month after, a year after, the attacker came back in a different way. So you are again going to the doctor, and again you are going to the doctor. And you can ask yourself, if you're a doctor that every time fixes a disease and then the disease comes back, are you a good doctor? And that was like kind of a philosophical. That's really the philosophical problem with detection and response. You're always reacting to the attacker, and you can be very good, but then the attacker will come back. And continuing this analogy, if you do your exercise and eat well and don't eat a lot of carbs, etc., the chances you will go to the doctor are actually reducing. And application security is all about that. It's being able to creating code from the day one that is harder for attacker to manipulate. And if you do that, the job of the detection and response, which is reactive after the fact, is actually becoming much more redundant. So really the important thing is living good health and not finding diseases quickly. And that's actually, again, I'm a little bit philosophical, but one of the things that was really important for me when I had the opportunity to look over the overarching thing that are happening in security, I said I want to go back to the root problem, shift left, but really shift left to solving the problem that hopefully are most cost effective to be solved. And if they are solved, all of the rest of the problems of detection and response of attackers are being much easier. So in application security, I saw exactly this opportunity. But also, I saw a big problem that is getting bigger because every company is writing code, but also getting deeper because the way that we write code is also different. It's not now, again, the sequential, let's plan an application, develop it, test it, deliver 1 year after. But actually, it's some of our customers today are delivering code to production hundreds of times or thousands of times a day. And they are doing that by tens of thousands of engineers. That's what they're doing. So actually understanding your code, because it's changing so much and so often in so many ways, and now comes Copilot or an LLM like ChatGPT type of technology that are writing code autonomously. So actually the surface area is changing so much and growing and becoming so complicated that the problem, so it's coming back, it's a big problem and it's an important problem and it's changing and getting bigger every time. And I thought that I have both passion to help solve this problem and also have good ideas on how to approach it, similar to the pitch that I had when we started the Defender as an EDR. I thought that we can do things as an industry fundamentally different, and that if we do that, we'll build a really big company and a really impactful business. And this is why I decided that I want to dive in from the headquarters to the trenches and try to do something big again in the area of application security. So that was motivation number one. Motivation number two, I wanted to do that in the real world. Like Microsoft is an amazing place, only good things. Maybe I'll come back in the future, but it is a big company, and the big company moves slower and also are more vaccine to mistakes. If you do mistakes, you have more chances to fix them. by definition, okay, because the company has more resources and more time and more trust by customers. And something that I wanted, a personal experience that I wanted to have in my life, is building a big business, hopefully successful, but from the beginning, in a smaller team, much more with less moving faster, but also with less places to do mistakes. And this is why I said that I actually want to join a younger company in the domain of application security. And then came Apiiro. Apiiro I know for a long time. I know Idan, the co-founder and the CEO, Dan Plotnik, was actually a peer of mine in Microsoft, where he managed the identity team, security team, and I managed the endpoint security team. So we had a lot of time together. We built trust and love, and so I knew Apiiro and what they did and the approach that they are taking to application security. And I thought it is an amazing combination for me to join a great team with a vision that was very much aligned to how I think application security should look, radically different, and with a team that I trust, and a team and a company and a set of investors that think big, that think that we need to build a huge and can build a huge business, not only solve a small problem. And this is the type of thing that was really very important for me in Microsoft. And now that we're replicating, solve something that is significant. So the combination of the domain, my passion, personal passion, and my appreciation to the specific company, to Apiiro, made me join around 6 months ago as a chief product officer to Idan and Jonathan and the other people in Apiiro. And since then, I'm in heaven.
So, I think one of the common misconceptions within cloud security, right, is probably that a CSPM, a cloud security posture management solution, covers your applications in the cloud, that it provides the expected level of insight into the application, into the code base, into the pipeline, right? But that's not the case. I'll tell you right now, right? I have a CSPM. I have one CSPM that looks at the cloud, and then I have like 5 different technologies that look at applications. It's frustrating for me as a security person because I want as few places to go as possible to manage the security in my environment. Not even from a single pane of glass that was kind of that terminology has kind of been burnt down and buried, right? Because it was just so overused. But you want as few places to go as possible so that you can make an intelligent decision about your environment of what you should be doing to better secure it. And I'm wondering, a part of application security, as we've seen with SolarWinds, is the supply chain security. And that is a huge, gigantic headache that everyone in application security and cloud security overall has, because now it kind of reshaped how everyone is thinking about, security overall, right? It's like, oh, well, we need to start looking at everything that makes up this application, everything that makes up this environment, because what if, this random vendor is breached that we use for this one thing, and now they're manipulating it in a different way that we didn't expect, right? And so does your application security posture management solution also cover supply chain attacks and supply chain security?
Yes, the short answer is yes. I think there is like you said multiple things. I'll start with the CSPM and the ASPM for a minute. Okay, like cloud security posture management and application security posture management. Thanks for Gartner for inventing these acronyms, but really they are capturing yin and yang, I think, of protecting modern applications. Like you need to protect the house and how it is being built. That's the analogy of the cloud infrastructure. You need to make sure that you have protected VMs and protected buckets, and they are connected to the right way, and there is a network that is connected the right way and configured the right way. And but also you need to protect the people that are in the house, which is in this analogy the application itself. And the application itself, as I said, is built from thousands of different modules that are changing thousands of times a day by thousands of people, which are the engineers. And you can't protect only the envelope and being agnostic to the content that is running there. And therefore, I'm not inventing anything in the sense that there is a like investment that you need to make in cloud security, infrastructure security, and there are investment that you need to make in actually the content of your application security testing, and now ASPM. So first of all, they are, as I said, they are kind of, you can't do the one, or the one is complementary to the others. And also you see that in the personas that we are serving in big organizations are sometimes like CSPM are usually going into the cloud infrastructure type of teams, and the SPM is going into the application security that are working closer, shift left, closer with engineering and trying to identify. I would say that's another important things about SPM. The key thing there is not only identify risks after the fact, but making everything that you can do in order to stop them from ever happening again. Oh, some from happening at the beginning. So actually putting guardrails. And ASPM is a lot about, in my view, prevention, and not only about detection, prioritization, and remediation. And that's I think that's part of what a lot of our ASPM competitors or friends are missing. It's not only yet another system to collect logs and collect alerts and show them in one queue, but it's actually to manage the technology and the process that stops them from ever happening again. And that's the tough thing. Second thing I would say, when you say protecting an application, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 3 years ago, it meant protecting the application code. Okay, you had tools like SAST that search for SQL injection in the code, and you had tools like SCA that search for vulnerable open source dependencies, and you had the tools that you have still, tools that are looking for secrets in code, etc., etc. But modern application, as we said earlier, is much more than the code that it is being developed. It's actually all of the supply chain of how it was developed. So to your point of SolarWinds and open source dependencies, but also it's also the way that it was deployed to the built and deployed into production. So even if you have a code without SQL injections at all and no vulnerabilities, but this code was built via a pipeline that had a vulnerable Jenkins plugin, the code is as vulnerable as a code that has SQL injection. And even if your code, like delivery to the cloud is a code element, so it's based on infrastructure as code. So even if your application code has no vulnerabilities, but your deployment to the cloud, Terraform, etc., infrastructure as code actually is doing that in the right, like deploying it to a public server, then your application is as vulnerable as you had SQL injection. And even if the code that you wrote is actually amazing and has no vulnerability, but you used not even a vulnerable package, you use a malware, like a package that has no CVE but is doing really bad things, then your application is still not secure. So really modern application security must look from, I would say, even design, like even your application has no vulnerabilities, no SQL injection, and not open source, but it is designed in the way that there is an API that is open to the internet, as in not authenticated, and give access to a PII information, then it's not secure. So the only way to actually secure modern application is understand what the application needs to do in the design phase, how it is being developed and changed hundreds of times, thousands of times daily during the development phase, how it is being built, and how it is being deployed and executed. And in Apiiro, that's part where they said, like, hey, Apiiro is a big company, it's a company with a big vision. That's the core to what we're saying. We're saying application security is from design, threat modeling, design, software architecture, to code, scanning of code, understanding vulnerabilities in code, understanding code reviews, understanding changes which are code, understanding the software components that are coming outside into the code through deployment, through build, understanding the build pipeline and the deployment pipeline. And that's kind of the core to what we are doing. We call it risk graph. But the idea is that all of these things are interconnected. The way that your application is being built is a combination of APIs and data models and service functions and Kubernetes cluster and configurations. And only by combining all of that together, you can have the foundation on top of which you can say, here is a vulnerability, and this vulnerability is more important than this vulnerability. And answer really the question that all of our customers want us to answer, which is, I have 1 hour. Out of the 100,000 vulnerabilities that appear in my queues from the 5 tools that I have, what are the 3 that I really need to solve, that has the biggest likelihood to happen, or the highest impact if they happened, or are the most cost effective for me to fix if I actually now put 1 hour into that. And that's the core intellectual property of what we do, and manage a process on top of that, allow you to understand that you are progressing, communicate with your developers, and manage an improvement process that shows that my 1 hour today is more effective than my 1 hour yesterday, for example.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. It's an area of security that is growing rapidly that more and more people have to pay attention to. So, Moti, unfortunately, we're coming to the end of our time here. I feel like we almost need a part 2 to this episode to have you back on and talk about Apiiro a bit more. But before I let you go, how about you tell my audience, where they can find you, where they can find Apiiro, and what the best way to reach out would be.
So we are in apiiro.com, apiiro.com. I am available even directly through my email, moti@apiiro.com, and obviously through LinkedIn. And I think I'll say like 2 last maybe sentences. I think application security is a market like endpoint security 10 years ago, is a market that is completely being changed in the coming 2 or 3 years. 3 years from now, it will look completely different than how it is today. We didn't even have the chance to talk about generative AI and how it actually affects code understanding and vulnerabilities in code. But there is so much innovation that is happening there. And the second thing that the companies that will win and succeed to create worldwide impact are the ones that think about this problem holistically. And I think we are one of the few companies that are actually doing that, looking from design till production to code. And I'm happy for everyone, either LinkedIn or direct email, to if they are sharing the passion or have a question to reach out. I hope through the podcast you see the lightening in my eyes and the energy of really it's an important, huge problem that we have now a unique opportunity to solve in the coming years. So totally in.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really excited to see where this space goes, and I'm looking forward to bringing you back on to talk about it a bit more. Well, thanks everyone. I really appreciate you listening, and I hope you enjoyed this episode.